Have you ever wondered what your favorite game was like before it was finished? What the developers changed, added, or even removed? What could have been? This would be for me. I have had a lifelong interest in prototypes, glitches, and similar unseen medias. I still have this interest, and I have become cautious about delving into the lost world after a recent event. It all started what seems to be a completely chance of occurrence. I had been visiting some thrift stores throughout the day, looking for some video games and robots to add to my collections. As it was getting late, I decided to check out one last store before I went home. It was a little thrift store in the middle of town. I remember having many lucky finds there, and to this day was no different. I walked in and headed for the DVDs and games section. As always, I was surprised to see over 15 copies of Tekken 4 for the PS2, sitting neatly on the shelves, in various conditions. This was somewhat of a common occurrence, although usually with VHS tapes rather than games. I giggled at the thought of how so many copies of the game would end up there. Not long after, I was handing a copy over to the cashier. As soon as I got home, I went to my room and wiped the dust off of my fat PS2, which I hadn't used in a couple of weeks. I took the game out of the plastic bag and examined thoroughly. This case was exactly the same as the others, although it had seen better days. The disc, on the other hand, was much different. It looked like a bootleg CD-R, but it didn't have a label indicating it was one. There was a text, however. It said the following: Tekken 4 version 1.3, test debug disabled, 2006-23. You can't imagine how much excitement through this. Perhaps I was drawing my conclusions too early, but my mind instantly went to the possibility of this disc being a beta. I looked back to ensure that there was no debilitating scratches or damages. Then I placed it into my PS2. I was giddy as I watched a typical boot fade off the game. Instead of the CGI intro I was familiar with, the game immediately went to a dark blue screen, a voice clip on the announcer saying, "Good morning" played, and then a white plain text appeared similar to what was on the label of the disc. There were a few differences, those being indication of Japanese text and Namco logo in the bottom right corner, and had two options, start and debug. It was obvious at this point I needed to do something special. My hands were sweating with anticipation. What secrets could this hold? Based on the date and version of this number, had already had an early version of the game. Perhaps the arcade version was being developed on a PS2, and the first thing I tried was selecting debug, which soft-locked the game. I suppose that debug truly was disabled after I restart. I selected the first option. It was sent me to a simple menu, with just a black screen with white text again, with two options. This time, though, they were different. They were story and free play. I decided to try to select free play first, in order to see the differences in the gameplay. When selected, it had sent me to a simple character selection screen with low images, and all the options except for 4 were blank out with the question mark, aside from TTT1. Most likely because of the rest of the roster hadn't been implemented quite yet. The 4 selectable characters were Nina Williams, Dean Earwicker, Fiona Gilberto, and Greg Murdoch. Dean and Fiona, the unintended, were early names of the characters Steve Fox and Christy Monatrell. For the simplicities, I'll take to refer these characters to their final names from now on. All the selectable characters were new on the game except for Nina. This had me curious. What was so special to make her so selectable in such an early beta version? The gameplay of the beta was abysmal compared to the final. It was clunky, with the stages unfinished, and the music was absent. In all, it seemed to be an underwhelming. I went back to the select screen and tried to pick Greg. The game soft-locked, and I reset it again and tried with Christy. Another soft lock. I was confused. Why would these characters crash in the game? They were selectable for a reason. Maybe it was a quirk of the programming and the early menu, or they weren't really finished. Finally, I tried Nina. When I selected Nina, a short loading screen appeared that appeared to have said loading story. Obviously, I hadn't selected story mode myself. It started with the regular story format in Japanese, although much shorter than the uncolored sketches. When I translated it, the text read the following: Nina was hired to kill. She will kill. Earwicker must die. The assassin missed the taste of blood and the smell of death. She enters King Tekken 2, for to pursue him. Something unnerved me about this. Tekken 4 was always considered to be the darkest and most serious game in the entire series, but it never once seemed this dark. Maybe I was forgetting something. This didn't matter because I fought anyways. I needed the secrets. There were 5 fights in total, 4 of them being against Christy and Greg, and the differences being that their costumes and levels in the final fight, however, was against Steve at this final game. The fight took place seemingly complete level and contained with the silver of music that cut out after a couple of seconds, descending into a quiet high-pitched buzz. The longer it went, the more it pierced my ears. I triple-checked my AV cables just to make sure they weren't the cause. I thought of it too the game was at this point, but later I learned that there was no sound at all. My chest sank to my blood went cold, and the longer it played, I became extremely wary of what was about to come. I pressed on anyways. I needed the secrets to unfold. It ate me inside out. It was all I could think about. I needed to see it all. After the final clunk of Steve's health went down, the game skipped to win animations and instantly went to the epilogue of the story. I was surprised to see an animated cutscene. The camera was very slowly zoomed in on Nina from behind. She was sitting in a room similar to the one in the final version, although darker and emptier. In her head was a large black rifle that she stared intensely. Nina didn't budge for what seemed to be like ages, and for a bit, I've considered restarting the console, but the zoom off of the camera indicated that it wasn't a crash. It was intentional. After about 5 minutes, the camera angle changed to show a human woman's face and upper body. She opened her eyes very slightly and held the gun up, cocking it. This scene lasted a long time. The longer it lingered, the larger my fear grew. This was all extremely unnerving, especially remembering the final version. Dark as it was never this worrying. Nina's eyes pierced mine more and more the longer I peered. The ringing sound returned, and so did the feeling inside my body. Her eyes were nothing more than white ovals, devoid of any real all life. No feeling, no sign of life, no soul. They were just empty. After this eternity, the cutscene continued, but my fear didn't fade. She just moved to the hotel view and pointed the rifle out, focusing on Steve's head. The ringing became deafening. In what seemed like a split second, Steve went from standing, living, breathing, to becoming a squirming mass of flesh. He lay on the sidewalk, his head cracked open, leaking fluids and brain matter. Bits of skull floated along with the pool of blood that slowly formed. His beautiful light blue eyes quickly lost all life, rolled back to its rapidly fluttering lids. The gore itself wasn't shocking. It was a PS2 era graphics and sights that were common in M-rated games. I don't even know what it hurt me. The camera lingered on this sight. The sound was so unbearable that my entire body felt cold and dead. I wanted to look away, but my body wouldn't budge, no matter how much I struggled. I needed to see. I needed to see it all. The focus was soon paired back into Nina, who sat with the same blank expression adorning her face, and she closed her eyes fully and turned the rifle away from the window after. Another century of waiting. It then turned to face herself. She wrapped her pink lips around the barrel of her eyes, rolling from her eyes. She was a monster. No soul of any kind until this very last second. Her finger twitched with anticipation on the trigger. She then pulled it. The screen flashed extremely rapidly from red to green to blue in a seizure-inducing manner. then froze on a corrupted image of a woman in isolation. Chamber sprinkled with the same colors, the buzz was now shown real. As of this, I finally came out of my trance as a terrible crunching emitted from my PS2. I rushed over to unplug it and manually pulled the disc tray out. I was horrified that the PS2 suffered a catastrophic hardware failure, completely destroyed the disc, ripping chunks from the plastic and melting through with the laser. I gazed up at the disc for quite a while, thinking it deeply what I just witnessed, and placed the disc back in the plastic bag and threw it in my drawer. My life continued as normal without no adverse effects. I still retained my interest in hidden content of my enjoyment of the Tekken series, but in the event, made me realize the most important rule: some secrets were never meant to be seen.